Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where you share the sources, and we dig in and pull out the most important insights for you. It's your shortcut to getting really informed on complex topics. Today, we're jumping into a really interesting stack of material you sent over. It's all about on-site decentralized diagnostics and a whole bunch of related health assessment tech. Very forward-looking stuff. Our goal here is to unpack it all, figure out what these things actually are, what's driving the growth, and look at some of the specific examples in the sources. Some are pretty wild.
Oh, definitely diverse. The sources really cover a spectrum. You've got your traditional diagnostics kind of moving out of the lab closer to the patient. But then, yeah, they also get into some very different, almost unconventional energy-based approaches. Our job really is just to lay out what's in these sources you provided impartially so you get the key information.
Okay, let's start with that main idea. On-site decentralized diagnostics. What exactly are we talking about there, based on these sources?
Yeah, so at its core, the sources describe it as a pretty big shift. Instead of everything happening in a central lab or hospital.
All right, where you usually have to go get blood drawn or whatever.
Exactly. This is about moving the testing or even just the sample collection much closer to where you actually are. So maybe in a local clinic, a pharmacy, or potentially even at home. The goal, as the material presents it, is really about improving healthcare, making it more effective, more efficient, and definitely more accessible for people everywhere.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's pushing this change? What are the drivers the sources point to?
Well, there are a few big ones highlighted. Patient convenience is definitely number one.
Huh.
If it's easier to get a test
And
done,
more likely to do it, right?
exactly, better experience, better compliance, that's key. Then there's the technology itself. The tools are getting incredibly sensitive. They often need way less sample now, like just a tiny finger prick instead of a big vial of blood.
Okay, so you don't need the whole phlebotomy setup.
Right. And that opens doors. Also, the rise of telemedicine is a factor mentioned. More virtual care means more need for remote or easily accessible diagnostics. And, we can't ignore the impact of the pandemic. The need for social distancing definitely gave a boost to testing methods that avoid crowded waiting rooms.
Yeah, you can see how all those things would push this forward. Convenience and access. That sounds like a huge deal, especially for people, who live far away from clinics or need regular tests. The sources mention this being a game changer for tracking chronic conditions at home or seeing if meds are working.
Absolutely. That continuous or frequent monitoring becomes much more feasible. And another really big driver the sources highlight, clinical trials.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think about virtual trials. If you can use point-of-care tests instead of making people travel to a study site for every checkup.
That would save a ton of hassle.
Exactly. The sources suggest it could lower costs, make enrollment easier, and allow for much larger, more diverse groups of participants. There's even a statistic mentioned something like 70% of potential trial participants in the U.S. live more than 2 hours from a trial site. Decentralized testing basically eliminates that problem.
Okay, this is where it starts to get really fascinating.
Yeah.
The sources list just a huge range of actual technologies. Some sound pretty standard, just smaller or faster, but others are different. Let's get into some examples. Maybe start with the blood tests, the ones aiming for point of care. Okay, first up is Future Diagnostics. The sources highlight their work in point-of-care tests, focusing on speed and reliability for biomarkers. They apparently use things like dried chemistry and can handle really, really tiny amounts, nanoscale volumes of reagents and samples, getting big results from tiny drops, essentially.
Yeah, precision on a small scale. Then there's Radisson's. This is described as decentralized lab testing tech. The big idea here seems to be integrating lots of different tests onto one device. The source suggests one machine could potentially do the work of like 10 or 15 standard lab instruments.
Wow.
It combines several technologies, centrifugal microfluidics, solid-state detection. They even mention using optical sensing technology like the kind used in the Hubble telescope.
Hubble Tech for blood tests.
Apparently so, according to the source. The goal is instant, lab-quality results from just a finger prick. Better compliance, potentially lower costs compared to traditional labs. They mention aiming for a low price point, too.
And then Pixel. They have a device called HemoScreen for the complete blood count, or CBC.
Right, a very common test. And the key thing here, according to the source, it just needs one drop of blood from a finger prick. And it reportedly gives accurate results for 20 standard CBC parameters comparable to central labs. They mention its relevance for things like pandemic readiness or just making CBCs easier to get.
So these first few really show that trend, don't they? Taking familiar lab tests and making them smaller, faster, needing less blood, right there where you need them.
Exactly. It's established science, but with cutting-edge engineering to kind of miniaturize and democratize access to that information.
Okay, but the sources go beyond blood tests. What other kinds of on-site assessments are mentioned? There's Lumen. It's described as a handheld device, portable, that measures your metabolism accurately.
Mm-mm. The source points out this kind of metabolic tracking used to be just for elite athletes or clinical settings. Lumen aims to make it available to everyone.
Then Food Marble. This one's about digestive health, using breath tests.
Yeah, specifically their Air 2 device measures hydrogen and methane in your breath. You use it with an app to track food, stress, sleep, symptoms, trying to figure out food tolerances.
And Anura. This one sounds pretty futuristic. A health AI that uses your phone's camera to measure general wellness from facial blood flow.
That's what the source describes. It emphasizes it's for general wellness, not a replacement for a doctor's advice, obviously. It apparently uses patented tech, TOI, mixing neuroscience, psychology, physiology, and deep learning. The idea that just a video of your face could offer health insights is, well, it's quite something.
It really is. The sources also quickly mention a couple of others here. A cardio risk assessment and something called Cavitat for evaluating bone lesions in the jaw. So yeah, a real mix there. Blood, breath, even looking at your face. Different ways to get health data without needing a full lab.
Exactly. It broadens the scope beyond just biochemistry, looking at other signals the body gives off and using tech to interpret them conveniently.
Then the sources shift gears a bit, talking about clinical decision support tools. Isabel differential diagnosis is highlighted here. It's presented as a leading tool for doctors.
And the source makes a pretty bold claim about its accuracy.
Yeah, it says 95% of the time, based on the symptoms the doctor inputs, the correct diagnosis is actually on the list Isabel provides.
That's significant if true. It covers, what, over 10,000 conditions? Uses algorithms, partners with publishers for evidence, and it can plug into electronic medical records, EMRs.
Right, integrating into the workflow. Disease risk assessment is also mentioned in this category. So these tools aren't doing the testing, they're helping make sense of the results, potentially from those decentralized tests we just discussed.
Precisely. They're like the analysis layer, taking data wherever it's generated and applying AI and huge databases to help clinicians think through possibilities, especially complex cases.
Okay, now we get to the part where the sources take a really sharp turn. The heading is literally Energy Medicine and Dirory, various quantum energy technologies. This feels completely different.
It absolutely is a different category. This section details technologies that, according to the descriptions provided, operate based on principles like energy, frequency, vibration. The source material even includes that famous Nikola Tesla quote, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration as kind of an introduction to this whole area.
Right, so let's walk through these again, just reporting what the sources actually describe. First up, Amidi beds or holographic medical pods. And yeah, the source itself flags this as controversial Area 54 technology.
And the claims, well, let's just state what the source says. According to this source, these things have supposedly been around for 80 plus years. The material claims they're not Earth technology, but from off-world ETs. The source states they work using tachyon particle and plasma energy.
Okay.
It describes 3 types. Holographic, regenerative, which it claims regenerates tissues and body parts, and reatomization.
And the reatomization ones.
This is where the source claims get truly extraordinary. It claims these can regenerate a whole human body head to toe in like 2.5 to 3 minutes. The source says this means, for instance, an 80-year-old woman could become 30 again.
Wow.
The source also claims they can regrow limbs or organs in hours, cure stage 4 leukemia in minutes, eliminate things like cancer, ALS, muscular dystrophy easily and cheaply. It states there's an AI that controls it, scans the body down to the micron level, identifies DNA, picks up genetic imperfections.
And the source suggests this tech has been hidden but will be released via the military, potentially slashing healthcare costs.
That's the narrative presented in the source, yes. It also acknowledges that this sounds like a perpetual fountain of youth and that some view it as science fiction. We're strictly reporting the contents of the source here.
Understood. Quite a claim presented there. Okay, moving on to other technologies in this energy category described in the sources, Metatron.
Yes, this is described as a hardware-software system using something called nonlinear diagnostics, or NLS. The source calls it a new generation of medical analysis system. It claims it allows for accurate determination of the body's actual condition, its organs and systems, using these NLS principles.
Then there's Region U3, described as non-invasive, applying the first do no harm principle.
Right. According to the material, this uses spectral dynamic analysis, bioresonance, biofeedback, and principles from the Chinese acupuncture biomeridian system. It's positioned as being for whole person assessment, energy balancing, rejuvenation, and regeneration.
And what does it supposedly do?
The source claims it assesses physical, emotional, psychological states, detects pathologies, analyzes stress. It claims it can change disturbing frequency patterns and correct deviations from norms. It also claims to work with acupuncture points without using needles, detect and eliminate parasites, show how the body reacts to supplements, and even pinpoint a psychological reason behind a physical issue.
That's a lot.
It is. The material claims a full scan takes minutes, shows up to 1,170 functional stress conditions, assesses 70 psycho-emotional states, offers symptom correction, and even DNA repair.
Okay. The sources also briefly list bioscan, something about a 3D display of risks and organ health.
Meridian stress assessment using acupuncture points for profiling.
And advanced decision support for telemedicine, just listed there. Next is the AMP coil. This is described as a wellness tool, again citing energy, frequency, vibration, and Tesla.
The documentation explains it combines sound frequency delivery with PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, plus something called bioacoustic magnetic field and bioresonance. It claimed it uses sound delivered via a modified Tesla coil to create this magnetic field using sine waves to help tune cells back to their natural resonance.
And there's software involved?
Yes, Better Guide software with a frequency library and a function called voice print that the source says analyzes your voice to find areas needing harmonization, then creates custom sessions or journeys.
Okay, then NES Health. This is presented as being about bioenergetics.
Right. Assessing and correcting the body's control system, which the source calls the body field. Their process is described as 3 steps. Scan using a hand scanner or your voice, apparently very quickly. Identify finding blockages or distortions in energy information flow. And recommend a protocol using their products, Infoceuticals and a device called MyHealth.
Their philosophy is information guides, energy guides matter.
That's the holistic view presented, yes.
Wow.
The source notes it's based on 30-plus years of research. It claims the system can see beyond symptoms to root causes, look at interactions with nutrition, environment, even the impact of emotions or trauma.
And it can be done remotely.
Yes, non-invasively and potentially remotely. The MyHealth device is described as combining familiar tech like 10S and PEMF with their proprietary information technology using specific frequencies, can be used on or off the body.
And the Infoceuticals, liquid remedies.
Yes, described as mineralized water imprinted with resonant math codes via fields and light. The source posits they act as a guidance system for this body field. It references the theory that water can carry non-chemical information, mentioning Jacques Benveniste, and draws some parallels and differences with homeopathy.
Imprinting. How does that work, according to the source?
The source explains it can happen naturally or be done using pressure waves or light pulses needing repetition. It even mentions the heart potentially imprinting information onto lipids for memory.
Okay. Also briefly mentioned bioenergy testing, called an advanced biological age stress test, and regulation thermography, non-invasive medical thermometry.
Yes, described as a way to view whole body health and hidden issues. The source mentions an FDA-cleared system, AlphaSite, using AI for early detection.
Cell well-being, this uses hair, epigenetic hair mapping from Germany.
That's the description. A scanner analyzes hair follicles for epigenetic field information, producing reports on nutritional needs and environmental concerns. Epigenetics, as the source explains it, is about influences above the gene's environment, food, emotions making up 98% of our function. The material claims hair acts like an antenna storing this info.
But it's not diagnostic.
No, the source clarifies it's for preventative optimization, needing regular checks because influences change.
BioWell, this uses the Kirlian effect, or gas discharge visualization, GDV.
Right, developed by Dr. Korotkov. It's described as a desktop camera and software for assessing a person's energetic state. You put your fingertips on it, a weak current causes a glow, the camera captures it, and software interprets it based on acupuncture points, Ayurveda, etc.
And what does it supposedly show?
The source states it gives an impression of energy and stress, tracks changes, visualizes chakra balance, analyzes the biofield, generates meditation music, assesses responses to interventions, but it's explicitly stated not to be a medical instrument.
Iridology is next, looking at the iris of the eye.
An alternative technique, yeah. The source explains it examines patterns and colors in the iris to get info about systemic health. Mentions its history in Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine. The material suggests digital imaging can support it, potentially showing correlations with health issues or risks even before symptoms appear.
And finally, the circular ring. This sounds more like a wearable.
Yes, described as a personal health device. Continuously monitors biosignals, heart rate, temperature, activity. The source says it alerts you to unusual readings, helps track activity, recovery, immune readiness, lifestyle effects, and provides recommendations for behavioral choices, helping you respond to your body's signals.
Wow. Okay, you weren't kidding at the start. That is an incredible range presented in these sources.
Yeah.
From, you know, hyper-accurate micro blood tests
Yeah.
to analyzing breath
Yeah.
to facial blood flow,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to these energy field assessments, hair analysis, eye analysis, and even, well, the controversial medbed claims from that one source.
It really shows the sheer breadth of what's being explored in health assessment and maybe intervention. Definitely pushing diagnostics closer to the individual, but also exploring very different ways of thinking about the body and health. It's a
Hmm.
move towards personalization for sure, and
Wow.
potentially greater accessibility.
So, okay, thinking about you, our listener, trying to make sense of all this,
Mhm.
what's the big takeaway from these sources? What does it all mean?
I think it highlights a fundamental potential shift. Uh, Healthcare assessment, as described here, isn't just about waiting days for results from some far-off central lab anymore. The landscape seems to be really expanding, bringing tests closer, making them faster, yes, but also exploring entirely new ways to understand the body, its chemistry, its blood flow, its electrical signals, but also, according to some sources, its energy fields, its epigenetic influences.
Yeah, it feels like there's this push for faster, easier insights on one hand,
Hmm.
but then also this move into areas that really, challenge how we traditionally think about medicine and biology.
That's exactly it. These sources present a whole spectrum. You have documented point-of-care diagnostics evolving, and then you have concepts like the med beds or energy medicine operating on fundamentally different claimed principles. It definitely raises questions about what we'll consider valid health assessment or even intervention in the future as these things develop or are presented.
So let's leave our listener with a final provocative thought, something to chew on based on everything we've unpacked from these sources today.
Okay, how about this? Consider how this move towards decentralization, towards such diverse technologies, could fundamentally change not just how you get information about your own health, but maybe what kind of information you'll seek out or even trust down the line. If, as these sources suggest, your health might potentially be assessed through your facial blood flow or a snippet of hair or your body's energy field. What does that imply about the very nature of health itself? And perhaps more importantly, who holds the keys to understanding and maybe influencing that health in such a diverse future landscape?